Good morning, everyone. I'm joined this morning by Maya Ozery, who directs our Cooper Athletics Leadership Program in our Department of Athletics here at Georgetown. Maya, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Let's begin our conversation. You've joined our community a little more than 2 years ago to lead our Cooper Athletics Leadership Program. Could you tell us a little bit about this program and your journey to Georgetown to take on this role?
Thank you. And first, let me start with just thanking you for inviting me to be part of this and to talk about our program. I really enjoy speaking about the program, so I appreciate you taking the opportunity to kind of pause and ask about it. It's been an honor to be part of the Georgetown community and to speak with you today. So the Cooper Athletics Leadership Program is a program that was established in 2015 as part of a gift from Georgetown parents, Peter and Sue Cooper, who we've discussed before, who are just amazing individuals, and each one of their children has had, a really significant career at Georgetown. So we have a lot of gratitude for the Cooper family for being part of this, and who they saw an opportunity through athletics to establish a program that would create some structure around leadership development. So the leadership development program is really designed to provide education and training to support student athletes as they enter Georgetown to be a Division I student athlete within this level, within this institution, and that's a really unique experience. And the transition post-graduation, so the transition out of being a student athlete for whatever is next for student athletes. So our approach to leadership development isn't that it happens kind of in a classroom or lab, but that it's part of the formation the student athletes have within their teams, with their teammates, with their coaches. So it's a lot of fun to be part of that, to find ways of formalizing leadership development in that way. My role to Georgetown is really through my own path as an international student athlete. I'm originally from Israel, came to the US for the opportunity to combine athletics and academics, which is probably part of the reason that I just love working in this environment. I think that the combination of pursuing high-level academics and then competing at a really high level in intercollegiate athletics is just such a unique experience. I'm a real believer in intercollegiate athletics, and I know you are too, so I appreciate that. What brought me to Georgetown is really Lee Reed, our athletic director. Has been just, to me, kind of a beacon of light in terms of his view of student development and how he thinks about student athletes' experience as student athletes, as students who are also athletes, who are members of the community, who interact with many different members of the community within athletics and outside of athletics. So our program is really uniquely positioned to make a difference for our student athletes. We work with coaches, student athletes, and staff members. And I'm happy to tell a little more, but the reason I'm here is really the fact that this program is integrated in every kind of part of the athletic department.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, one piece of that structure in athletics is our Student Athlete Advisory Council, the SAC. And every campus has a SAC, and the NCAA has a SAC. Talk a little bit about the role that the SAC plays in intercollegiate athletics here at Georgetown.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the role of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee is really national. So it starts within the NCAA. Student athletes have a voice at the national level. They are asked to give their opinions and feedback and input on different components, whether it relates to policies, procedures, and so forth. So, and then it trickles down to the Big East. So the Big East has a group that represents the student athletes of the Big East. And the same here at Georgetown. So our Student Athlete Advisory Committee is comprised of student athletes from our 29 sport programs, and they represent the voice of the student athletes. So their goals are to bring their community together, to bring the community of student athletes. We have over 700 student athletes. So this committee, sees themselves and their purpose as one, to bring people together, to understand the different experiences of our student athletes. Within our sport programs, the experience is very different from student athletes from different sport programs. So the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, what they try and do is be an inclusive group that really tries to understand what those different experiences are, and then to advocate for the student athletes as kind of a united front. So they give us, as administrators, they give us input on, again, policies, procedures, programs, initiatives. So right now, you know, they have several initiatives that they're working on going into the fall semester. And I think, like everybody, they're trying to figure out what does their group, what does their committee, like other organizations on campus, they're trying to figure out what their role and purpose is when they're not actually on campus gathering, you know, in our Thompson Athletic Center, our beautiful space, gathering in person. But their role is really significant. Lee Reed meets with our president, Mary Pagano, who's a senior on the women's lacrosse team. He meets with her regularly to get input and kind of give us a pulse on the experience of student athletes.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about what it's been like to adjust during COVID-19. How have you and the Cooper Athletics Leadership Program worked to find ways of supporting the leadership development of our students under these current conditions?
Yeah, you know, I listened to the conversation you had with Dr. Todd Olson just last week about the adjustment with NSO and all the amazing things Student Affairs is doing to adjust to this new reality and engaging student athletes, and the need to be creative. And we've done the same. We've tried to really first say, okay, what is our role in developing student athletes and engaging our community? So our community are students who are athletes. So there are students who are also engaged in other ways with the university. And really ask ourselves, how do we do that in a way that moves the needle for people? What is it that our community needs? And that includes our coaches and staff members. So what we've done is we've tried to be creative, tried to, you know, kind of draw things up again. I think that as I was thinking about this, I think that in athletics, we're kind of maybe uniquely positioned too to manage some of this adversity. As a former student athlete yourself, I wonder if you lean into some of the skills that you gained as a student athlete. But I think that in higher ed, we often say like we're pivoting and we're changing what we're doing. In athletics, we talk about, you know, okay, we're at halftime, we have to change the game plan. So I think that that's what I've done. At least I've leaned into those skills that I have as a former athlete, and have thought, okay, what is our game plan now? What is our role? How do we fit the role that we are asked to serve at this point? One of those things that I've identified just really strongly is the need for connection and community. I think we've had a lot of conversations about the sense of belonging. And what does that look like for student athletes who aren't athletes right now in the way that they might be familiar with?
Sure.
Right? Like, how do we connect people around a common purpose and goal when maybe that isn't happening right now in ways that we've known in the past?
Sure, sure. Thank you. Now, you mentioned our director of athletics, Lee Reed, and our athletics department under the leadership of Lee have worked to support our students and to work alongside them in bringing attention to racial justice and issues of equity. Can you talk about some of the work that our students and our athletic team has engaged in over the course of the summer?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing this up. I think, you know, Lee Reed, our athletic director, and Sharon Brummel, our senior women administrator, have been just very clear and direct in their commitment to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the last several months, I think, like many others, we've recognized the need to address racial justice and racial inequities that are happening around us, but then also within our athletic department. And our student athletes have been a strong voice in that, and we're really proud of our student athletes for engaging that. You know, just recently, so we've, back in the spring, back in the fall, we created a diversity, equity, and inclusion working group. And that then continued into the spring, so last spring. And in the summer, that working group, I think, recognized the need to not just bring our community together our athletic community together around diversity, equity, inclusion, but very specifically around racial justice. With that, we then developed pretty quickly. We connected with different people on campus, and this is a really great opportunity to mention Rosemary Kilkenny, our Vice President Rosemary Kilkenny, and her leadership in this area. And she has lent more than a hand. She has been very involved in all the work that we have done. She's been part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion meetings. It's been really amazing to have her presence and her expertise around the table with us. Since the summer, so in June, July, and August, we had 11 different engagements in our community. So some of those more visible, some of those less visible in terms of kind of public perception. Some of those were mandatory for our coaches and staff members, and some of those were optional opportunities for our people to come together. The way that we thought about it is opportunities to become more educated, so to hear, to gain knowledge, to engage around gaining more insight to the experience of Black people in this country and Black student athletes in this country. Part of it was really to come together as a community and just to listen to one another. And I would say the third piece to that is then taking action. So we've divided the ways that we've engaged our community in education, community building, and taking steps forwards. So taking certain action. I would say that one thing that I think is really unique about our athletic department, and Lee Reed has led the way in this, is just the importance of modeling our behavior. So the way that we've thought about this work related to racial justice is really to start from the top and to start with conversations with coaches and staff members before we start having those conversations, before we lean into those conversations with our student athletes. We at no point are trying to do anything but say, okay, recognize where we're at and try to move forward in a really positive way, in a way that can support our community, in a way that all members of our community feel like they can thrive. And what we've recognized, I think, this summer is that some people don't feel that that is the environment that we're in. And I think that it's been a really positive, it's been very positive to see those conversations, to be part of those conversations, and to move forward with student athletes. So that's a good opportunity to just speak about the student athlete kind of led initiatives. So we had a group of student athletes that came together, a group of Black student athletes who came together and created the Black Student Athlete Coalition this summer. And they're still, I think, really engaged in this conversation in a deep, deep level. They've come together to advocate for the unique experience of Black students who are also athletes. So the Black Student Athlete Coalition, to me, when I think about that, each one of those identities is inherently significant to their experience at Georgetown. And as an athletic department, we want to support them in whatever way that we can, recognizing that we may have missed at times, recognizing that there's a lot of room that we can still move forward, but also recognizing that this is part of who we have been. We have been an athletic department who has supported its student athletes for advocating, for speaking up in the past, and we intend to do the same in the future. So the Black Student Athlete Coalition is one group that came together. They meet weekly with Lee and Sharon. They have a lot of contact with them. They're able to communicate their experiences. The other part to that would be the Student Athlete Advisory Committee that I mentioned, and that group is, again, representatives of all of our student athletes. And they've tried to find ways of really advocating for issues that they believe are important for student athletes. And one certain initiative that I'll just mention right now is connecting with, so they've really reached out to other organizations on campus and tried to connect with other groups of students on campus. And one example of that would be a voting initiative with GU Politics. So GU Politics is very active and do amazing work, and we've connected with them as an athletic department, while our Student Athlete Advisory Committee is connected with their student group. And they're putting together an initiative where the student athletes can show support. I think one thing that we've recognized is, there's some visible ways that we can leverage the platform of athletics, and we're seeing that across the country as well. whether it's in professional sports or college sports. And we've done that in certain ways where Lee has shared statements about racial justice. Lee shared a statement about peaceful protests with our community. And then some ways are less public. Some ways are, us doing the work behind the scenes and closed doors, is leaning into tough conversations, is being real with where we're at and what we need to do as a community. So it's been really incredible just to see the progress that we've made, the impact that I'm hearing at least from our coaches and staff members who are saying, hey, this is important to me. I want to lean into this, regardless of people's identities. And I think that we've been able to create an environment where that happens, but we all know that we still have work to do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Now, as you've just described, sport has a way of bringing communities together. And this is a time that we're working to deepen a sense of connection and collective responsibility, particularly as we try to uphold some new public health commitments. We're being asked, all of us, to develop new habits and to develop new levels of self-discipline and self-sacrifice. These are many of the lessons that our students experience as they engage in intercollegiate athletics. Are there lessons or insights from your work that can help us as we seek to create this shared sense of responsibility among our community?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that the shared sense of responsibility, I think that something that you learn in athletics is not just teamwork, but is playing your role, and whatever role you need to play at that time for the greater good. So I think often, and President DeJoya, you were there at the men's soccer final, and I think of that experience. I work with our men's soccer team, and anybody that watched that team last year win the national championship, one thing that really resonated about that team is how every single student athlete, whether they played 90 minutes or they didn't play at all, were there for the greater good. And the goal was to win a national championship. And everything that they communicated was, we want to win a national championship. It wasn't about, I want to play more, or I want to play less, or I want to score goals. So as I relate, the experiences that we have in athletics, and when I relate to leadership, it's understanding that at times we need to understand what is the goal, what is the bigger purpose, and how do we fit into that? And I think, I think of that men's soccer experience and I smile, and I think that probably resonates with you as well, because you were there. And when I think of what we're going through right now, I think that athletics and athletes have a tendency, and I think are trained to recognize that their roles may change. And I think all of us are called upon at this point. Our roles have changed. At this point, my role has changed, right? I'm working remotely. I might not have the interaction, the face-to-face interaction that I have normally with student athletes, with coaches, with staff members. Our coaches' roles have changed. They're not actually drawing up plays. They're drawing up different plays. They're trying to figure out how to keep people together remotely. So I think that would be one, is understanding our role and understanding that our role may change, and it probably will change again. And I think the other piece is just recognizing that the challenges are opportunities to grow. So as we're asked to show discipline and wear a mask and social distance and follow all the health guidelines that the university has communicated very clearly about, I think it's also recognizing that this is a really challenging time, and people are experiencing this very differently, and having empathy towards one another. But in athletics, you learn that those are the opportunities where you grow probably the most. After a time where you're not very happy, or where maybe some people view it as a failure. So those would be the two things I think about.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for joining me in this conversation today. In closing, is there one message you'd like to share with our community as we begin this fall semester?
I think one of the messages would just be following the health guidelines. I think more than anything, we need to trust the process and follow the guidelines that the university has put put in front of us. I think more than that, though, if I could add another one, is just it's been really inspiring and affirming to be part of a university community that's engaged in deep conversations around racial justice. And as we move into the fall semester, I don't think that we're going to go back to normal, whatever quote unquote that means. And I think that we all have an opportunity to play our role in making sure that our community is inclusive, and where all of our community members feel that they can thrive. So to make sure that this isn't a moment in time, but that this is a movement as it relates to racial justice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maya, thank you for joining me, and thank you for all that you do on behalf of our students. I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you, for everywhere, everywhere.